discussed the idea of using your technology to find location for new establishments like museums or other cultural things, or restaurants even. I don't really understand how you do it, because if you see a location, I mean in your maps at least, if you see a location which is packed by people, where many people go, it means that there's something to see there. And if you see a location which is not visited much, you may think that it's a good location for a new establishment, but you don't know. So how do you really measure what a good location would be for a new establishment? I didn't understand that using your methodology.
Okay. I didn't mean that the methodology is a way to decide where to build, but the thing is you need to understand the visitor flows in a destination in order to start and think where do you want to congregate in the existing place, or you want to on the contrary go where there are no people. But in order to know that, you want to know where the people are and what they're doing. So it's more a tool for kind of understanding the flows. I'm not saying it's the only tool, but I also suggest it's a tool you should use before and after, or if you use it constantly, you can, for example, if you do an exhibition, before you're going to build another Guggenheim here, maybe if you do an exhibition somewhere, which is one-time exhibition, you can measure if people actually went to a new location or not, and who went, and what, and when, etc. So this is this was my point.
If I had to choose in Bilbao, I would, of course, locate next to the Guggenheim, so I don't need your technology.
Okay, so, but I would just add, maybe.
But based on this data, you can use the semi-Markov methods or other methods that will allow you to simulate what will happen if you introduce or destroy different variables in the system, so that you will be able to simulate how flows change. So it's a really good tool for assessment really, and planning.
Can I just add about your choice to use Guggenheim? Maybe if it's a private organization, yes, but if you, in the municipality, maybe this area is already developed, you want to, like in London, the South Bank, etc., to push people.
For me, there are some ethical problems with the use of this technology that are related with a very common statistical problem. It's the sample selection bias. I don't know if you have control of the difference between those that agree to participate in your experiments and those that refuse. Because even for me, that I am involved in research, I will say, no, I don't want to participate. I don't want to be controlled by your machines. No? And now I'm thinking of getting back to my Nokia instead of my smartphone. No? So I don't know if the data that you are collecting can be really generalized to all the population, and if there are a bias related with the sample that you get.
I guess that we are using different and similar techniques. Sometimes we have been distributing mobiles or apps in mobiles like...
But you cannot oblige a particular person to use the mobile. So
But there are different techniques again. How many times have you downloaded any app from a city in your computer?
From now on, no.
Okay. All right. So that many times, every single time you open your Google, it will say like, would you allow me to use your location? And you say no, you say yes. Okay.
But the difference between if there are statistical difference between those that agree and those that reject.
So of course, so the very first thing is regarding ethical issues is that one of the methodologies or techniques that we are using is by we embedded our technology in any app that is already a commercial app, because this is a way to really have huge, data, a lot of people providing the data. So for those purposes, ethical issues are solved by popping up a window that will say something like, "Would you allow to us to use your location?" And if you say yes, so that the ethical issues in some ways are solved because first you have asked for permission, and second, the information is the IP information. It's not the personal information. We don't have personal information in the way that we don't know who you are. We are not using your data for any other purposes. So regarding ethical issues, this is one of my answers. Regarding sample selection, of course there are biases. I mean, sample, you have, I'm not so sure whether, sampling or this, how to say, approach, this is not about sampling the universe and trying to extrapolate your results to the overall population. The approach and the technique is radically different. It's a big data mechanism, so that it's a different, scientifically speaking, different approach. It's not about statistics like traditional approaches where you are sampling a universe, even a unknown universe.
Can I add? First of all, I think it's a very good question. Second of all, I think that we have different dimensions. First of all, another problem will be that if somebody knows that he's tracked, maybe he will change his behavior. So this is another problem. I have to say that I'm more concerned with smartphones. In the GPS tracking, from my experience, we didn't have any refuse. You think it would be strange, but people were very happy in theme parks and hotels to be tracked. In medical tracking, we had a lot of people that didn't want to, even though it can help them. So it was strange. In the medical, it was very biased, the people that participated. In the tourism, it was kind of, we sampled every 10th visitor, usually no problem, people were happy. But with the smartphone, I think it will be a bigger challenge because people have to download it to their device. And again, but I think that ethical concerns with tracking, we have the Americans, we just heard, they're tracking everybody. So the problem is not with the apps you are tracking, it's the problem with the apps they're putting inside your device without, But I think, this is the question you raised, I think it's a very big challenge. But I think that this challenge is interesting, and we can maybe write papers about it, because this is also, you have bias also in questionnaires. You have bias in everything. So I think we as researchers have to take in account these things. So aside of, it's a fancy game, it looks very nice, okay, but still we need to really think what we're losing, what we're winning.
Actually,
just one thing. In terms of bias, do you think that using a GPS, for instance, the bias is higher than in any other case of empirical investigation on, let's say, contingent valuation? I mean, we found that the sample, depending where you collect information, where the people are approached, usually raises similar problems, and apart from the ethical issues which in fact are solved by voluntary choice, and also in this case, I didn't run the research, but I was told that there were no people didn't refuse to use this device. I think this is a common problem. Probably your question, however, raises the issue of being very cautious in drawing general implications, but this is something which should be done usually in this kind of empirical analysis.
Better to have data than not to have any
data. But being cautious, aware of the limits, limitation of what the material has.
But because I am not familiar with this kind of approach, I don't know how important the bias will be. That was my point.
It depends. You see, in tracking groups, for example, that I showed you, nobody asked them. So the 3,500 groups, all groups were being tracked. So it depends, but it's a depends. I think that the question is really good, and we need to always. Take this into account when we're planning, when we're reporting, when you draw conclusions?
Actually, there is a quite interesting issue. We may think, I will put in a scenario, we think that the population is X, and we sample it, and usually we have 1,200 people interviewed, you know, like irregular interviews for. We have a sample that the state statistically says that it's enough as to represent and then extrapolate the data or the results to the general population. But in that study, as we have seen in the Italian case, we know that what people report and what we can track usually is different and has been shown. And it's something that is shown once and once again. And in spite of that, we are using survey data to recommend and to sort of put, you know, issues into policy making. So it's a contradiction.
It strikes me that it depends on the research question, doesn't it? I mean, something gave an example earlier when you talked about data. Sorry, I was just saying it just depends on the research questions and the context. I mean, you gave an example earlier where you're not conducting statistical inference.
Yeah.
In that case, there isn't any issue of sampling bias. In other cases, just because there's a systematic difference between the people you're studying and collecting data from, whether it's observational or stated preference, it's only a bias insofar as it affects the parameter of interest, right? I mean, there may be systematic differences between people who sign up to a project, but if that difference does not correlate with the hypothesis you're testing, so it sort of strikes me it depends on the issue. I wondered where you, because I had your question in mind, I wondered whether it came in with surveys. Because when you mentioned that certainly matched the data with survey data, whether that would introduce some biases. I was interested that you said that there was no tendency for people, there didn't seem to be a systematic tendency for certain types of people to fill the survey in. But I wondered whether actually, for me, actually, my eyes lit up when you mentioned the survey. I was slightly concerned about biases there, actually.
It's a very complex issue.
I didn't want to ask this question, but I'm asking this question because you mentioned it, the fact that people contradict with their behavior what they state. Not so sure they contradict because you consider time. Now, if you want to visit the church, it will take 10 minutes. If you want to walk through a mountain, it takes 3 hours. What does it mean? That you are not interested in visiting a church? So I think it's also important that you have to consider the time you need to experience something. And you cannot say that spending less time one thing, the other thing is less important because it probably deserves some less time. I mean, if you visit the Guggenheim Museum and you were talking about this yesterday, probably you watch artwork for 5 to 10 seconds, probably not more than that. Even 20 seconds would be a lot of time, standing 20 seconds in front of something. You walk quite quickly, or maybe 1 minute. So what is 1 minute? Nothing compared to the rest of the day, but for you, that minute could be a very important experience. So I think what to you, the devices you have are very interesting, whether you have this kind of observation of emotions, and they're not related to time, they're related to intensity of this emotion.
You raised a very good point. Probably in terms of, if I think of the survey conducted on the Otter Lake, there is, however, another data which somehow support the idea that behavior in terms of time was not coherent with the state preferences. In fact, it also spending for cultural, there were stated preferences for spending for cultural destination, which in fact were in contrast with the fact with the time spent in the places. Okay, but then the idea of trying to, then the proposal would be, for instance, to try to, not standardize, but adding a benchmarks for time which is needed in different kind of destinations.
Yes, they spend 2 hours in the restaurant and 1 hour at the Guggenheim Museum. Doesn't mean the restaurant is more important than the Guggenheim Museum. it means that they took 2 hours to design.
Actually, I think it's quite interesting observation, because I think we don't have a time theory, what is a social time theory. The only way we have approached time is a physical, in the physical way. But we know so little about the meaning of the social time. And I am here in consumption spaces, because I'm thinking that we are framed within the consumption. We are consuming, space, time, and content in this space. We know very little about it. And I think you raise really complex questions about what time means for specific things, and whether we could measure the value of things by using time. It was the reason that I was thinking that with these new approaches, we have the first variable, that is the space where they are. Now second, we know how long they have been in a place. So it's another way, another parameter to start thinking about, by using time as an approach, what's the value allocated by someone, cost opportunity, travel cost methods into something. So we could have an economic assessment of those specifically heritage sites. And view theory is something that we...
And there is another point. The differences in time is in relative terms. I mean, heritage is heritage for all the groups. And what is relevant is that for that kind of item, the time allocated by those who pretend to be very much interested does not differ significantly for the others who say that it's not relevant. So the differences in the time needed for the wide range of items is somehow solved by the fact that for each item, the differences related is looked at for each item. So the problem that you might need more time for walking a mountain is common to those to the three profiles of tourists. And for the product one, each of them allocate time to different items and somehow show that their stated preferences are different from their real preferences.
If I'll just add, I want to emphasize that the fact that we're using more accurate digital technologies doesn't mean that we're not allowed to do interviews, qualitative. So we can continue to do the things that we've done before, but we have a better way when we're sitting later on for an interview, we can ask more accurate questions. And we can then maybe understand why we spend so much time in the restaurants. Is it because we're tired, or the service was slow, or are we happy with that or not happy with that? So just to emphasize, those techniques is not replacing anything. I just think they can add to what we already use.
The very last one, please.
But maybe precisely my question would be a little bit with everybody. If you compare the results of your new techniques with the inquiry which have been made before, more traditional methods, do you have the impression that you have some major difference in your conclusions?
I can say in my case that I think that it gives, at least for me, it gave ability to ask new questions as a geographer. So I didn't, it's not that I can ask, I cannot compare, but you can start to ask questions that you couldn't ask before, because the amount of data and the precision is so high, you can analyze a city on a level of pixels. But, so I cannot, so there are endeavors we didn't even try, I didn't try to do before because it was not possible.
In the same line, I think, as Professor Cheval, I guess that the new techniques allow us to have new insights. And when we have new insight, we have the ability to sort of pose new questions and perhaps enhance a little bit our understanding. because it depends on what is the final, what we are looking for, what questions are we trying to, depending on the question we could say perhaps, yes, we are getting, a better results, more precise results. But basically we are getting like new insights and allowing us to open a little bit, our view about what human behavior means in that specific context, when consumption starts. As I told you, we have embedded the system in an app. So I know something else about, just having someone at the Guggenheim, just looking at it or being in. I know that someone, so many days ago, 17 days ago, 12 days ago, 4 days ago, downloaded an app. I look at that app of the Guggenheim, and I know what is the conversion rate between the day that downloaded to the day they use it in the location. So it allows me to understand the sequence of the consumption, something that before I even didn't have the ability to start even thinking about it. And not for one person, but for thousands of people behaving that way. So that I think that the new technologies basically provides us a scale, the ability to open up and scale up, our samples, because now we have thousands of people, millions of people doing things that we can track no matter where they are in the world. So I know that someone in Shanghai is downloading today an app of the Guggenheim in Bilbao, and I can even trace it and know whether it converted and came, how long it took for them, whether they have followed the consumption pattern. So it opens us another way, scaling the granularity of the consumption and the behavior, it's another one. So I think that by opening up the paradigm, we will be in a better position to start scientifically analyzing human behavior, and in that case, just putting in your context cultural consumption. So, yes.
So thank you very much. We finished.
Just one answer. But the fact is that the purpose of the study was not was just to try to show whether there were differences in the way how people behaved and how people stated their preferences. While the motivation more or less are the same, even with stated preferences, with immediate preferences than those of previous literature.
So thank you very much. Now we have a coffee break.